It's working. Hi, everybody, and welcome to Metaphysical Insights. I'm your host, William Becker, and I am so pleased and grateful to introduce you to a very special guest and a friend of mine, Tim Robey. And Tim is an archaeologist. He worked at Stonehenge for several years. He is a very accomplished author. I can't get enough of his books myself, and we're going to talk about some of those and several other things. If you have questions, just type them into comments and I'll play magic and they'll light up on the screen. Tim, welcome so much. I really appreciate it.
It's an absolute pleasure to be here again. Yeah, it always is. And
Uh,
always good for an opportunity to talk about the books or about Stonehenge. Um, although I ought to start by correcting something there. Although I'm an archaeologist, um, I wasn't an archaeologist at Stonehenge. Or people get the wrong idea. I've never put a trowel in the ground at Stonehenge. But about 2 miles away from there is or maybe a mile away from there is the closest I've ever been, which was working with the Stonehenge Riverside project. And when I
oh,
was teaching, I managed to volunteer with them a few times.
okay.
And one of the digs was just up by Fargo Woods, which is about a mile away. Um, and we dug some very, very unproductive test pits. It was, yeah, yeah. But I haven't actually worked at Stonehenge. That's for um, really world famous archaeologists and sort of the cream of academia get to work at Stonehenge.
Right.
Um, Oiks like me don't.
Well, that's their loss. But where you were working then, that's part of where they're finding um, the beginning of the road where people would have come down the river and then crossed
No,
over.
I didn't work on that. I would have loved to have worked there. Um, I'm not quite sure when that happened, but uh, whether that was it was the year I didn't get to go anyway.
Hmm.
Um, No, it was the stuff that I did. We worked on. I did a couple of days, really, 3 days or something, at Durrington Walls, which was
Okay.
absolutely fantastic, fascinating
Oh, it
stuff.
is.
Um, and then a couple of days on another dig up on the hill behind Durrington town, and a couple of days on digs in the fields um, adjacent to Stonehenge. Uh, one of which, as I say, was digging these incredibly boring test pits, and one of which was doing some quite nice stuff on a couple of pits in a what turned out to be a Bronze Age enclosure.
Oh,
Um, but yeah, it was just they did their student digs at a time when I was teaching at the time, and it was I just had like a week's window um, between what I was doing, closing down the sort of year of teaching that I'd done, and starting to plan for the next year.
right.
And I had sometimes a week, maybe 10 days window in the middle. And fortunately, 3 out of the 4 years or so that they were doing that, I was able to slot in 1 or 2 days of volunteering on their sites,
Okay.
um, and thoroughly enjoyed it.
Hmm.
Um, a lot better than most of the sites that I managed to work on as with as a commercial archaeologist. Uh, but that's it. You when you do that, you you go where you're told to go, really, and do the jobs that you're told to do. It's not
Right.
like sort of university where you can pick your projects a little bit.
Right.
Um, this was very much here's a job, go and do it. Um, but some of them were good and some of them weren't.
Well, I would imagine you found some pretty interesting things on those jobs too.
Sometimes,
Yeah.
yeah. I think. if you want, really interesting stuff, I think you have to go back in, I suppose, to well, into the 90s, certainly, when I was working in Essex, and before that in Southampton. And Southampton was just amazing. It didn't matter where you stuck. I mean, this was down in the medieval town. It
Right.
didn't matter where you stuck a spade or a JCB into the ground. You came up with something unbelievably complicated and very, very interesting. Um, and tried to avoid uh, British Telecom cables and electrical networks. It was quite an education doing that. Um,
Right.
but yeah, and then before that, of course, was in Africa doing cave excavations and things like that. So totally different kind of archaeology altogether. But
Now,
I don't know which I prefer.
in the cave explorations, what were you looking or finding there?
We were doing well. Most of the stuff I worked on was coastal caves,
Hmm.
uh, and it was late Stone Age, so sort of broadly equivalent to, certainly technologically, to Mesolithic in this country
Okay.
or in Europe.
Hmm.
Microliths and stuff like that. Uh, and so they were hunter gatherers, sand hunter gatherers. Um, between the latest stuff I had to deal with was about 800 years old, and the earliest stuff was 7,000, 8,000 years old.
Okay.
Um, that was mostly what we were doing. I worked on about 3 different sites there, and then I also helped out with a rock art project
Okay.
that one of my colleagues was doing, and we sort of all went out into the field together, and they dug on my sites, and I went and looked for rock art paintings and recorded rock art paintings with them. It wasn't my research project, but we all just mucked. There were like 4 of us, I think, and we all mucked in on each other's projects because that was the way to get the things done. And then in the
Right.
holidays, we put everything aside and um, gave students field experience. And then we had so many people we didn't know what to do with them. But um,
Right.
yeah,
Oh, that sounds
so
fascinating.
it was fascinating. It was, and just totally different to anything you find in this country. But
Right.
um,
Right.
I
Well,
miss it.
I believe it. How far back do humans go in South Africa? Because I know it's more like Ethiopia, I think, where the species originated.
Yeah, but you get along the Limpopo Valley, which is the sort of northern boundary of South Africa, um, and in parts of the northern part of what used to be called the Transvaal, and I'm afraid uh, very unwoke. I can't remember what the new name for it is.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, the northern part of South Africa, um, there are Australopithecus sites and early Homo habilis sites, which are over 2 million years old.
Okay.
Um, down in the south, in the Cape, as far as I'm aware, there's not anything that old, but we do, it does go back 300,000 to 250 to 300,000 to early, what they used to call archaic Homo sapiens. So
Okay.
there was a famous, one of the famous sort of fossils was Saldanha man, which was from Saldanha Bay in the Western Cape, which was only about 25, 30, about 30 miles from where I was doing my master's degree, and we were doing our rock art research and stuff like that. But that's a couple of 100,000 years old,
Okay.
so much, much older. Um, and they got sort of big Pleistocene animals, and the African equivalent of an aurochs. I can't remember what it's called, but sort of thing with 8 foot a buffalo with an 8 foot wingspan, horn span,
Right.
things like that. And I never got to work on those sites. I worked with the material from a couple of them, and I spent a couple of days actually visiting those sites, and I think we did some minor helping out of things, but it wasn't. I wouldn't have classed it as being actually working on the site. But yeah, most of what I did was, as I say, for the last 10,000 years post Pleistocene stuff.
Okay.
Um,
Oh, that's fascinating. It's such, well, all of that period from, er, it's hard to find a favorite for me. I'm intrigued by the development of the new out of the old. And part of what I love about your book series, this is the second one. I don't have the first one
yeah,
right here. Um, is it's at that period where the Bronze Age is coming to the UK, and it's still the Neolithic, but late Neolithic, early Bronze
yeah,
Age,
yeah,
the beakerware, the beaker pottery. And this book shows more too about local people being taught by people from the mainland, and with the pottery and the metalwork, um, and just how cultures merge and evolve and pick up from each other, and the things that there's still similar understandings of. Um, to me, that's fascinating.
Well, of course, that could be my perspective. Looking back on it from a modern perspective, you always kind of put a certain amount of the characteristics that you would like to see in those people in
Right.
them. Um, I was reading something today actually about a cremation cemetery um, up in Scotland, and I think it was in that this person was saying, what was going on then was a very different. The idea of gender and biological biological sex was obviously, as it is today, male and female, but the
Right.
idea of gender was possibly every bit as complicated as it is today,
Oh,
but
really?
different. So
Uh-huh.
you would you they were suggesting that I think they were suggesting that gender might have been defined by what you do and who you are rather than physically what you are. Um, so you wouldn't have to be necessarily a gay bloke to be seen as that. You could be just totally asexual, but you would be seen as a female or as a male according to what you did.
Okay.
I'm not sure I agree with it, but it was quite fascinating. I hadn't really thought about it like that before. That they might have had a very very different view. You always think it's going to be simplistic,
Hmm.
but they might have had a very different view, and it might have been not just similar to what we see now, but something built along completely different lines. The idea of gender, and you get these sort of female warrior female graves, certainly a
Hmm.
bit later, Iron Age, but you get those. You get male graves, which are who have distinctly female accoutrements with them, like mirrors and things like that.
Right.
There's obviously a lot going on there of bending of genders as we would see it,
Hmm.
but to them, quite possibly, it was just this is what this person does. That's therefore how they fit into the world. Um, Whether that's the case or not, we don't know. Maybe in 10 years' time we'll have a better eyesight on it, a better um,
Right.
idea of what's going on there. But at the moment, with DNA studies and things like that, we're just starting to sort out some of these things and some of the more difficult ones.
Okay.
Because I think when you deal with burials, and particularly with periods like the late Neolithic, when cremation is common,
Hmm.
um, you get very low numbers of uh, dead people that you can actually successfully sex. You can say
Right.
this is a male, this is a female. They've got to be adults for starters.
Hmm.
Um, and you've got to find the right bits, especially with cremations. You've
Hmm.
got to find the right bits of the skulls and the right bits of the other bones, and because they all tend to get crushed up and break up.
Right.
Um, and people are getting much better at it. I mean, when I went to university, they just said if you've got a cremation, put it in a box, and that's about all you can do with it. You can't even radiocarbon date it. Now you can. Now they've figured out how to deal with with cremated bones. Because one of the things is, of course, you cremate bones, you chuck oils on them, and you chuck might be very old, and
Okay.
you chuck wood on it, which might be fresher than the body, or it might be old wood. It
Mm.
might have chemicals in it which fiddle with the carbon content. And
Okay.
trying to actually sort out cremated bone, they just used to say when I was at university, they just said cremations, forget it, can't date them.
Hmm.
Now they can, and
Excellent.
they can. They've found ways. Well, I mean, now we've got DNA. We can actually get a much better impression of sex. Sorry, not gender.
Right.
Um, from even cremated bones. So I really think that in the next 7 to 10 years, as this research starts to come through into publication, we're going to suddenly find ourselves with a lot of really fascinating information about that kind of thing. Just hope we're both around to actually read it.
Yes, I do too. This is really interesting to me. And then it also opens up the idea to me, well, maybe men had, or their appearance was important to them too, and that's why they had a mirror, or um, a particular individual might have been more vain than the norm, or I mean, it opens so many different possibilities in my mind.
There are all sorts of things. I mean, a male with a mirror, when normally a male would have, weapons or whatever. I mean, we're talking Iron Age here, which is a bit later
Right.
than the period we're dealing with. But um, a male with a mirror, it's even been suggested that they might have been taking the Mickey and actually
Oh,
insulting him and saying,
right,
you're a mummy's boy. You never
right,
were any good as a warrior. You know, give him a mirror, put a mirror in his grave. And it might not be a gender thing at all. It might just be that people didn't like him.
right.
Um,
I can see that.
but again, there we're going straight into sort of mid 20th century ideas about liking what makes a man, and
Right.
to some extent those are, well, they're certainly on the way out the window. I think we've got a way to go before they disappear. But um, I can't believe how we keep going 2 steps forward and 1 step back. And
Yes,
or, in your case, in your country at the moment, 1 step forward and about 3 steps back. But
exactly. That's what I was just
yeah,
gonna say. Hmm.
as far as that kind of thing goes, attitudes towards gender and gender equality and all these sorts of things, it's just unreal how slow that change has been and how much resistance there is to accepting what you know the ancient Greeks would have looked at us and said, "What are you on about? What's the problem?"
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Exactly.
Um, and yet we've just come so far from that and drifted into this really stereotyped attitude towards people's gender.
Right.
It sort of came to a head in the 19th century, and it's just carried on bubbling over. And it should have gone in the 60s. It should have fizzled out in the 60s.
Yes.
Um, and equality for women and all sorts of things like that. They should have died decades ago, and yet they keep coming back. And you just think, I'm not going to see it, am I? I'm never actually going to see a time when there is equality for everybody, and that we just accept people for who they are, what they can contribute, and what they do, and what they give, and what they receive, whatever it is. You just accept them. That's that person, and every single one is different.
Yes.
And stop trying to pigeonhole everybody.
And
But
celebrate the difference.
yeah,
That's what
yeah,
creates a vibrant
so.
world.
I mean, I thought I grew up in a colonial sort of background and a very well, it was pretty right wing, but not by today's standards. I think it's just very conservative
Right.
um, upbringing, uh, and yet we had. I think we had a lot more um, acceptance of variation and of the difference in different people
Right.
than certainly by the time we went through into the 70s. By the time I went down to university, um, it was like coming back to UK. Whatever happened to the 60s? by,
Yes.
by the mid 70s, whatever happened to the 60s? People's attitudes have just gone boom, back to 1950.
Yes.
They wouldn't admit it, but they had, and we were more advanced in many of our attitudes towards um, gender and towards equality and things like that in apartheid South Africa than people were in Europe. And I just couldn't believe it when I heard, particularly men, but sometimes women as well, just going on about things you think just disappeared years ago. Anyway,
Yeah.
um,
No, I know what you mean.
getting on a
And
high horse there.
my
Uh,
um my first trip to Europe and to the UK was in 1984. I was 27, and um on the way to becoming 28, and it was so much better there than here. And I'm from
yeah,
Portland. I'm from a more progressive part of the country, and well, it was the first time in my life I ever felt at home. It was the first time I landed at Heathrow, and I think there are a lot of connections that are part of that. Part of it was culturally, and I felt safer, even though the
mm,
IRA was blowing
mm,
people up. Um, but I also the history and the ancient history love that we don't have where I live in
yeah,
the same way. We have indigenous peoples, but it's a very different piece, and there isn't in my part of the world. You don't see sites that you can actually do a lot as far as dwellings and everything, because a lot of it was temporary. I mean,
yeah, yeah,
a lot. There were some where I live right now. We had some permanent villages because there was enough fish and game and everything else around. But still, everything was made of wood and it rotted.
yeah, yeah,
So, and it's just the different cultures that interest me. Um, I like the foundings of civilization, ancient or parts of southern Turkey, Africa, and just watching all of that develop and then move up. But yeah, thank you. I appreciate your comments on that. I really do.
Yeah, but it's just always amazed you, and and you go back into the academic world and analyzing the Neolithic or the Bronze Age or whatever it is, and trying to actually pick out things that might actually be significant in terms of looking at gender and the different roles that the two sexes play, and I'm trying to think of the word now. I've just lost the word. Um, but the male and female roles, um,
Mhm.
sort of men hunt and female and women gather, and one of the things I was reading about was women mining in the Neolithic. There were a lot of women who were miners,
Okay,
possibly, but I don't know, but possibly because they were slighter built, so it was much easier for them to get down into these tiny little mines along with the children.
right.
Um, but and there are burials that or burials in mines, um, that were taken in the 19th century and early 20th century to be male, for the simple reason they were miners.
Right.
Therefore, they must have been slightly built men.
Uh-huh.
Um, and then now, they've checked DNA and stuff, and they're starting to realise there's actually a lot of women were involved in mining. Um, and we're just beginning to see this really complex web, and just, yeah, I mean, life was not simple or straightforward then.
Mm-mm.
Uh, and people sort of say, oh, they couldn't possibly have built um, Stonehenge or Göbekli Tepe or one of those things. They couldn't possibly have built it. They weren't advanced enough. Yes, they were, and they were
Yes.
complicated, and they were so. The potential is that they were so totally different to
Mm.
us in terms of the way they put the world together to make sense of the world, that
Right.
it we just can't put ourselves in their shoes, and that's part of the intangibility, the intractability of actually dealing with these ancient periods, is that we just don't know what they were thinking.
Right.
We don't know what drove them. Why did they build these monuments? Why did they feel they had to do that? Um, and they didn't just do it for the sake of it. They did it for some very odd reasons. And
Mm.
sometimes, did they believe in gods and felt that, like with our churches and things like that, we had to sort of raise something to the glory of our gods? Did they believe that, or was it that it was a way of pulling the community together? That's a very popular theory these days.
Mhm.
Um, Mike Parker Pearson and his unifying of Britain by everybody bringing stones to Stonehenge at 3 different periods of time, but let's not worry about that too much. Um, and yeah, and all these sort of huge earthworks and things. Places like Avebury, massive stones. Okay, they were only brought a couple of miles, but they're massive, and
Yes.
and
And there are so
ditches
many of them.
ditches
Like,
6 meters deep. You know, what were they thinking?
yes.
And there's the theory that actually doing it was part of was what was important, and that they kept changing these things not because they needed changing, but because changing them meant that you were still doing something about it.
Okay.
And that's a very different attitude to modern humans.
Yes.
Um, and it's difficult to sort of get our head round that kind of thing. But you just don't know what they were thinking. They could have had all sorts of reasons for doing these things.
Right.
Um, why are the pillars at places like Göbekli Tepe, T-shaped. There was a theory that they were supposed to be people with broad shoulders. They were
Oh,
anthropomorphic, and there are various people who argued against that for one reason or another, but and my brain sort of sits along the, well, where does the symbolism fit?
right,
What are those T shapes symbolic of if they're not somebody's broad shoulders? Because if they're broad shouldered people, why don't they have heads? Um,
right.
uh,
Are
you
they
know,
post holding up um, the world or the sky or
I suspect
something
they're probably
else?
holding up a roof, actually.
Yeah,
Um, I suspect they're holding up a roof, but
probably.
it's a very dry environment. Well, it wasn't as dry then, I believe. It was a much richer grassland than it is now.
Right.
But they say that they think, because these places are actually sunk into the ground, they say that perhaps they were roofed over,
Hmm.
and yeah, who knows? I mean, they might have been broad like that to carry roof beams. Um, and that might have been it. That might have been the whole reason. They say, well, what do we do now? We've built these things that hold the roof beams. What do we do with them? Well, let's decorate them a little bit, and or they could be highly symbolic. There could be a headless god, and they could be heads and shoulders, and.
Right.
Um, I cannot. I was trying to think of it the other day. I cannot remember the name of it, but you get these pictures of creatures in medieval times. They reckon lived in Africa, in North Africa, and places like that, with no heads. They're just like a broad-shouldered creature with a face on the chest. I
Oh,
can't for the life of me remember what they're called. They're quite comical, really. They appear for a little period in the medieval times, and someone's obviously got completely the wrong end of the stick about something they've read about people who live in North Africa. Maybe
right.
they saw people with turbans or with hoods or something like that, and decided that they didn't have faces, and the didn't have faces became didn't have heads or something. But uh, you know, or maybe there really were people like that, and these. No, I'm joking.
All right.
um,
Yeah.
yeah, we don't know what they were thinking, and that
Yeah.
is part of the draw and the magic.
And sometimes people just make something up for the fun of it,
Like I just did.
or
Yeah, yeah.
to tease or misdirect, or I'm sure that, well, I know enough medieval history to know that that certainly could have happened in those
Yeah.
periods. Um, it wasn't necessarily um, the nicest time in human history in many ways. Um, this is fascinating, and actually, it gives a little bit of an introduction to. I want to make sure we get a chance to talk about your books and how people can get them and everything else, because I want
Mm.
people to buy them because they're good.
Thank you for saying so. It really is. It's yeah. Um, I'm not very good at advertising, and I must admit. But, yeah, that's. Woo, there we are. There's the two. Where are we? There we are.
Hmm.
There's the two at the moment. Um, the Eye of Time. That's interesting. The Eye of Time, which is the first one,
Right.
and the Heart of the World, which is the second, which is about the next generation, basically.
Hmm.
And they're both available on Amazon. I write as T.S. Robey, not as Tim Robey. It's about the only time I use my initials rather than my name. Even my son used to call me Tim. Um, but yeah, T.S. Robey, and they're available through Amazon. The Eye of Time and heart of the world. And as we talked about in our discussion before, I'm hoping that there will eventually be a third book, which will be a group of shorter stories around a novella.
Mhm.
To produce to sort of, because it's almost de rigueur these days to produce a trilogy. So that will be my trilogy, and it'll take you through right into the Bronze Age proper, because these
Okay.
two, of course, are the right at the very, as you said earlier, right at the very beginning of the age of metals,
Right.
period that archaeologists sometimes refer to as the Chalcolithic, which basically means the Chalcolithic just means the Copper Age.
Right.
So this is a period when, certainly in Britain and parts of continental Europe, beginning of the Atlantic coast of continental Europe, people started using metals, but they didn't have access to tin, or they didn't know about tin. We're not sure,
Right.
and they were just producing things with copper and, of course, gold. It's
Right.
possible that gold was being worked as early ever as copper was, and that golden decorations and golden implements are coming right from the beginning of the use of metals. Um, Places like Varna, there's loads of gold from Varna, um, and just copper.
Mhm.
And then when the word about tin gets around, of course, tin is much rarer than copper, and there are fewer places you can get it. And
Right.
it's when they discover a couple of places in the west of Britain where you can actually get tin, particularly, obviously, Cornwall, and where I live in Devon. Um, and once you've got a location for tin, um, then you can start producing very high quality bronze, and you're into the
Right.
Bronze Age indeed. And that sort of happens about 150, 200 years after my books. It's very
Okay.
annoying, really, because I want to write some stories about people looking for tin and finding tin, but it doesn't actually follow on from this period. It's actually happening, 5 or 6 generations in the future,
Right.
which is one of the reasons I thought of doing the short stories, because one can
Mhm.
then jump around and jump forward a bit, and try and give some idea of the key changes. But yeah, what we're dealing with here is the end of the Neolithic and the beginning of the age of metals, and of course, new people coming in. And one of the things I wanted to say in these books is this wasn't a Norman invasion. We didn't
No.
suddenly get 20,000 um, armed warriors and whatnot pouring over from the continent and taking over society and wiping out the local Neolithic people. That just didn't happen.
No.
It happened over about 300 years, and yes, there is a genetic replacement. Um, the burials that we have at the end of that period are all carry Bronze Age DNA, European DNA, steppe DNA, and of course before that period, anything we get is the Neolithic DNA, which has its roots back in Anatolia, um,
Right.
and has been pretty much, it was a new thing which came in with the Neolithic.
Right.
It didn't replace it overnight. It wasn't an invasion in that sense. That very early period is literally just odd people coming through. In my book, he's the metalsmith is invited to come to Stonehenge, um, but we don't know if that happened, of course. But
Right.
these people were almost drifting across, and then maybe after 100 years or so, the word got back, and people started to come across in slightly bigger numbers, thinking, well, there's a good life over there because of what we know, because of the way, and because of who our friends are now, we're going to go in at the top end of society. So we're going to be going to a better standard of living over there, maybe, because we'll be at the
Mhm.
top echelons of society. We'll walk in, and we'll be able to get the top priest jobs, and the top metalworking jobs, and all this sort of
Right.
stuff. And with the effect that the result that and it became very important for the Neolithic people. Would have become very important for them to marry their children to the newcomers, because
Right.
it's huge status, and it welds the thing together. And it's very easy to see how the new Neolithic Bronze Age people could have actually just eventually replaced that upper echelon, that upper layer of society. There wasn't a great deal of differentiation in society at that stage, but
Right.
there were leaders and there were followers, and the leaders became the Bronze Age people, and the Bronze Age people and the leaders and um, the priests and the shamans, or whatever they were at the time, they were the ones that get buried in the round barrows, and so
Right.
they're the ones we get the DNA from, and we no
Mhm.
longer get the Neolithic people's DNA, because they're now the commoners,
Right.
and they're increasingly they are being, they're doing whatever the large majority of people did with their dead anyway, which, since we don't find hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of burials everywhere, we have to assume that what they were doing was um, probably cremating them and committing them to rivers and lakes and things like that,
Mhm.
where they disappear into the sediment, or disappear, washed down to the sea, or they'll start spread out over a very large area,
Right.
um, or just scattered on the fields, because bone will break down quite rapidly, relatively rapidly, if it's on the
Mhm.
surface. If you bury it, then it lasts for archaeologists to find. So if you
Right.
don't want to be found by archaeologists in the future, get someone to scatter your ashes on the surface, and in
Yeah.
2 generations, 3 generations, there's not much left.
Well, I
Um,
was going to ask too then, with the Bronze Age DNA, is there any of the Neolithic there as well, indicating it was a merger of the two people?
Not very much. Um,
Okay.
I, I, I don't keep up with this stuff. I must admit, I don't. I understand it at a very superficial level, um, and I don't keep up with it perhaps as much as I should, because it's quite a struggle sometimes to read it and make sense of it, and
Right.
also to see beyond what they want you to see. Because there's no
Mm.
doubt, whoever's writing a paper, they lay the paper out and they want you to read the conclusions and say, "Wow, yeah, that's good." Anybody, all of us, anybody who
Yeah.
writes a scientific paper is going to do that. You want them to read the conclusion and be right there with you. Um, and if you're at all skeptical, what you need to do is you need to be able to read through it and say, and use critical thinking on it, and just say,
Yeah.
yeah, well, that's not quite as clear as you think it is. So I'll keep that in my head, because that's going to affect the conclusions, and how much I believe them. You end up being 70% with them, or 50% with them, or not with them at all. Um,
Yeah. I've done
and
that
and
just watching Time Team and some of the other programs, and
absolutely,
it's like, wait a minute, how did you get from there to here? There are some important steps here you're not showing me.
we're not seeing. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
sometimes that's just television with Time Team. It's the
Yeah.
fact that the steps in between are a bit boring, so we won't bother to put those on the telly.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so the thing is that what we're getting from the DNA results is they're talking about a 95 to 98% replacement of the Neolithic DNA with the new DNA. Now that
Okay.
can happen naturally.
Hmm.
It's happened before. There are whole lines of mitochondrial DNA and ordinary DNA, other DNA that have just died out.
Right.
And we don't know whether that means all those people died out, or whether the DNA just changed as it went through, and sort of the other DNA was slightly more dominant, or and then when it gets to that sort of level, I'm way over my head. I just give up on it. But yeah, so they're talking about a very high percentage. I forget what it is, 95, 98%, something like that. Replacement of Neolithic DNA in burials with the new Yamnaya, I think it is. I always get it wrong. Yamnaya, the steppe people, steppe DNA from Eastern Europe coming in,
Okay.
and that could still happen with the scenario that I said. If you have amongst the newcomers, you have a preference always with them to marry within their own people.
Yes.
Yeah, and if their own people are now established as the top echelon of society, the top stratum, um,
Hmm.
and they're marrying within their group, then they are within 10 generations or so, you're going to have got rid of an awful lot of the DNA
Hmm.
of any cross marriages that happened in the early stages.
Right.
So that could be a deliberate or not even a deliberate, but a sort of preferential thing, a bit of an indication of their own prejudice, their own preferences for their own people.
Mhm.
Rather than that the Neolithic people were wiped out. I don't believe that for a minute.
No.
Just as the Neolithic people, when they came into the country in 4,000, 3,900 BC, they didn't wipe out the hunter-gatherers.
Right.
But they came in that case, they came in sufficient numbers over a period of probably 200 years. It was probably a faster changeover than the Bronze Age, but maybe 200, 250 years, something like that. They came in such numbers that they swamped the DNA of the hunter-gatherers, who were in their tens of thousands.
Right.
And suddenly, we had 500,000 people coming in, or 250,000 people coming in, and they literally swamped the hunter-gatherers, um, who were
I didn't
increasingly
realize that many
marginalized.
came.
Well, getting those the problem with the early Neolithic is that we don't have very much in the way of settlements and houses.
Right.
We've got them up on the north coast, Skara Brae and all those with the nice stone houses.
Right.
But in the south, where they're dug, as you were talking about, the west coast, northwest coast people, everything's built out of wood, and
Right.
these things don't survive, and we don't seem to have foundations, deep post holes or anything like that for a lot of the Neolithic. Occasionally we find them, and they did make permanent houses, but there are very, very few of them. And that means it's very difficult to actually estimate populations.
Okay.
And when you also go along with the idea that the burial pattern in the early part of the Neolithic was for the long barrows, and with the best will in the world, you cannot see the long barrows as containing all the bodies of all the farmers over the
No.
sort of 400-year period that they were being used. Um, there's just not enough of them. And we're
Even if
looking at, yeah, go on.
they they couldn't even contain all the bodies of the Mesolithic people that were already there.
Exactly, exactly. I mean, there are a couple of thousand
Yeah.
burials, maybe I don't know exactly what the latest count is, but it's remarkably small.
Mm-hmm.
So we know that it's only a small percentage. It's a selected percentage or selected group of people who go into those barrows, and they form over 50% of all the Neolithic burials that we have, and something like 25%, 23%, something like that, come from cremation cemeteries like Stonehenge.
Okay.
And so that leaves you with 25% odd for all the other types of burials all over Britain, and you don't, there's just not enough in those burials to suggest the whole population was being dealt with that way.
Right.
So again, it's very difficult to come up with a meaningful estimate of population at that time. Once you get into the Middle Bronze Age, it's much easier because the Middle Bronze Age sites are much more visible, and we
Mm-hmm.
can start looking at population densities and all sorts of stuff like that. But with the Neolithic, it's very, very difficult, very dodgy. When you look at hunter-gatherers, you can work out carrying capacities at the end of the Ice Age. How much could the land actually support in terms of hunters, knowing that what we do know about their hunting techniques? And
Right.
then as the Mesolithic comes in and get more, we get changes in the hunting techniques. Does that mean we can support that much population? And yeah, this is why they're suggesting that the amount of area farmed over the first few hundred years, compared to the population of the hunter-gatherers, it must have been a massive increase of people.
Okay.
And the thing is that they were burying their dead, or their selective dead, in things that actually protected the burials, and those are the burials that we find. And of course, they're all the Neolithic people.
Mm-hmm.
They don't include very much in the way of hunter-gatherers.
Right.
It's probable that farmers, when they came over, they didn't come over as soldiers, as an army, and take women, local women. They came over with whole families,
Mm-hmm.
and so they were always a sort of a sealed unit, a sealed population, if you like, who might occasionally have crossed over and married a hunter-gatherer, or a woman might have gone off with a hunter-gatherer, or a man might have taken a hunter-gatherer woman as a partner. But it would have been a fairly small number of people, and the chances that people like that are actually represented in the elite that are chosen for the special burials is fairly slim.
Right.
We'd have to do the DNA on every single one of them very, very carefully, and that's an awful lot of research money. It'll probably happen one day, but
Right.
not for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Bronze Age thing is much slower and takes twice as long. I mean,
Okay.
the first Copper Age stuff comes in 2400, 2450, something in that sort of period. Maybe even a little bit later than that. The first true bronze implements hit town about 2200 in this country.
Okay.
And the Bronze Age proper isn't really going until about 2100 BC. So it's 300 years straight away.
Mm-hmm.
And it's around about 2000 BC, 1800 BC when they're talking about this 95% changeover. That's 600 years of changeover to Bronze Age. Um,
That's
a
a
lot
big
of things
difference.
can happen in that time, but I think it was very gradual. And as I write in the books, it's something that was almost imperceptible. A lot of people just wouldn't have cared one way or t'other.
Mm-hmm.
There's a few new people coming to live, and they're living over on the hill over there. Fine, that's okay.
Yeah.
Lots of space for everyone, and it just wouldn't have affected them. the politicians and the priests and whoever, those people would have cared about it, and those are the people that had the interactions, and those were the people that had something with which to trade for the new ideas, the metals and the gold, this shiny stuff.
Right.
Um, and yeah, and so they were the ones who had status to gain by associating themselves with these people, and that's when the newcomers come in and they suddenly find that they're all going straight up to the top of society. They're not mixing with the flint knappers and the farmers and people like that. I mean, they're all farmers, but
Right.
they're dealing with the top levels. And as I've said several times, what they're doing is magic. If you
Yes.
see it from outside, they're getting a lump of rock and they stick it in a fire in a particular way, and out comes this shiny stuff that you can then shape into things and cut things with. Um, and it looks beautiful, and it works. It's like obsidian. It's amazing stuff. Um, Much better than old tatty old flint that's half grey and half brown and half white, and
Right.
all twirly and goes white and looks a bit grotty
With all the
and
volcanoes around where I live, parts of the area, not this side of the mountain, but the other side of the mountains,
yeah.
lots of obsidian in places. Yeah.
You're very rich in obsidian in the Americas, but I mean, I'm not sure there's any obsidian in this country at all.
I think
If
you
there
need
is,
volcanoes.
um, there are some. I'm not absolutely sure, to be honest.
Could be
I'm not
wrong.
aware of volcanoes not in Britain. They may
Okay.
be up north, but I'm not aware of anything down this end.
No, I'm not
Um,
aware. I don't think you. I'm not aware that you have any, but I think you
no,
have to have volcanoes to make the obsidian.
you do. Yes, you do. There's obsidian in Europe, various places in Europe. You
Hmm.
can get, but not in anything like the sort of quantities you've got in parts of Mesoamerica um, well, the whole all along the Pacific Rim there, right the way down into Chile. You've got, by comparison, huge amounts of obsidian.
Hmm.
Um, and you can do these wonderful things. The chances of being able to knock up a sort of 12 or 14-inch blade out of a piece of flint, you've got to find a piece of flint that's that big,
Right.
and there are very few places where you can get that, which is why places like Grimes Graves, um, the flint was traded all over the country and through into Europe, and because they were getting out huge, great nodules.
Right.
And you just you go down Stonehenge way, and I've never seen nodules that big down there. 8 inches, 9 inches, 10 inches, maybe you might be lucky and get something that big. But not. I mean, maybe it's all gone. They had the lot in the Neolithic, but yeah, I mean that's one of the reasons given why Graves was just um, was so popular. The quality of it and the size of it meant that you could actually produce quite large implements, and you could select the best. You could
Yes.
create blanks and mass produce stuff and that sort of thing. Um, yeah, I've forgotten where we were going with this obsidian thing, quite frankly. Uh,
Well,
yeah, and then suddenly people were producing metals, and you could make it the shape you wanted. And, you
yes.
know, admittedly, if anybody had been trying to make a copper sword in those days, they didn't have swords, but if somebody had tried to make a copper sword in those days, they'd have very quickly found that you spend more time actually straightening out the sword than you do fighting with it,
Yes.
because it bends a lot, um, and that's where the difference with bronze comes in. Once they've got bronze sorted, you suddenly get the development of swords. Daggers get, you get, first of all, you get daggers that are sort of 12 inches long, and then you get daggers which are, what do they call them, rapiers, 18 inches long, 15, 18 inches long. And then you get things which are slightly longer, which they start calling swords. And then you get these lovely Bronze Age sort of Mediterranean style swords with the handle end. They're quite narrow, and then they come out in a big wide blade at the end like that. And it's a
Oh,
totally different type of fighting. Everything else is stabbing like you would with a spear.
okay.
They're pointy things that you stab at things. Suddenly you're getting something with a weight at the end, and it's clubbing. It's back to clubs, boy. Or an axe. Instead of having an axe, you've got much more control over a sword blade, and you've got
Yes.
an area which is that long to hit somebody with, instead of a copper blade which is about that. They've got that much of a cutting edge, and it's a weighted end on the end. It's like a club, and it's a slashing weapon, and that's something that happens in the late Bronze Age in northwestern Europe, but all the Greeks and the city states in Greece, the Bronze Age sites in Greece and the Egyptians, they were using these weighted swords, and it was a totally different. Suddenly, people were slashing with swords;
Right.
they weren't stabbing anymore, and that's just understanding what you can do with this material. Anyway, that's a long way from the period that I'm writing about, because at that
Yes.
stage we've got copper knives, and they're mostly about 4 or 5 inches long.
Yeah. And one of the things I think I remember hearing too is that wasn't the copper in Britain a little bit harder than it was in Mesopotamia or some of the other early sites, Anatolia, where
Yeah,
the, yeah.
some of the
So,
sites in Britain have arsenical copper,
mhm.
and arsenic is a material that behaves like a metal.
Oh,
Um, I'm not sure if it classes as a metal or whether it's a sort of pseudo metal, but it behaves like metal, and it chemically it bonds like metal. And so effectively, what happens is you've got built into the ore, you've already got something with which the two things can bond, um, like making bronze, like
mhm.
or brass or zinc or something like that. It's a metal with another metal,
Yes.
and the copper has the arsenic in it, and the arsenic makes it harder. Obviously, also makes it more brittle. The problem
Yes.
with the harder you make the metal, the more brittle it's likely to be. Um, and one of the problems with arsenic bronze, as I believe, and I've never worked with the stuff, is that it is actually quite brittle, so it
Okay.
tends to break. Um, whereas bronze tends to, with tin, bronze made with tin, is more likely to bend first before it breaks.
Okay.
Um, but it still is a lot harder than ordinary copper. So yeah, you get arsenical bronze in northwestern Europe, which is I don't know how wide it is apart from Britain and Ireland,
Mhm.
but that actually works pretty well as a to make blades and things like that. It's much better than the sort of soft stuff we get. So yeah, so my people in the book trade with a couple of guys who are digging out arsenical bronze um, from Ireland, um,
Okay.
and
That makes sense.
have a little
Now I understand
and
that piece a little better.
yeah, so they're actually this stuff is actually so much better
Mhm.
quality at making blades than the stuff that they have. There are sources of arsenical copper on the mainland, and Cornwall
Okay.
and and Devon, around where I live. I mean, this place they used to have they used to mine for arsenic
Oh.
around here. There are several arsenic production sites, which are still slightly toxic. 150 years later. Um, there was there's arsenic here involved with the copper, um, and it makes quite good stuff. But in those days, they hadn't found the copper deposits here. And of
Oh.
course, as soon as they started looking at the copper deposits here, it could have only been a matter of time before someone came out and said, "Why are you just using copper when you've got all that lovely stuff? That you mix that with this, and you get bronze, and it's wonderful."
Right.
And they all understood the metallurgy. It'd be like modern day potters or chemists talking amongst themselves. And they'd all understand what they were getting at, but I mean, I'm assuming that someone came from Spain or Germany or somewhere like that, where they were using bronze, where they were using tin, and said, "This stuff you've got all this stuff here. Not only can you make your own bronze with it, you can trade it. You've got
Yes.
loads of it. We haven't got anything like this except in southern Spain. Southern Spain, they've got tin like Cornwall. It may even
Yeah.
be the same bunch of mountains. I'm not sure. Um, in terms of Gondwana land and places like
Right.
that, it may be the same related deposits, or I may be talking complete rubbish. I don't know anything about it, but I'm guessing. Yeah, so there's these places where you've got huge amounts of tin, um, and and once people find that tin and recognise that that's what it is,
Hmm.
then people will start to exploit it, and then you get once they're doing that, then you get the real rise in copper and tin mining in Britain, and you get places like Great Orme and other sites in Wales and down in Cornwall and Devon. You get the exploitation of copper because we've got local access to tin.
Wasn't there
And
tin over by Tintagel as well?
sorry,
Um,
is what?
what weren't they exporting tin from Tintagel area
Very
quite early?
likely, yeah, yeah. Um, what sort of period are we talking about? Are you talking
I'm talking early Bronze Age, or maybe before the Bronze Age, or I mean before the Bronze Age hit the UK even. Wasn't there trade coming up from the Mediterranean or other places earlier?
it's
I could be
possible.
wrong about that.
No, there is a sort of theory about. I mean, it goes all the way back to um, the Mycenaean knives at Stonehenge. The carvings
Right.
and things like that, and people trying to make links between Britain and ancient Greece or Lebanon or wherever, Carthage, places like that, and I don't think there's any hard evidence.
Okay.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Um, it's tantalizing, and there are one or two historical references from the Mediterranean, which suggest that people were going beyond the Pillars of Hercules.
Right.
Um, but of course, it's possible that, just thinking out of the top of my head at the moment, it's possible that what they were doing was going beyond the Pillars of Hercules and hitting the southwest coast of Spain, which is quite close to the tin and copper deposits all across the southern part of the Andalusian Peninsula there.
Right.
So they might not have been coming this far. But who knows? They might have been. There might have been some trade. I suspect it's a little bit later. I suspect when we're looking at that, we're looking at 1800 to 1500 BC, when the Bronze Age is going full swing in here. We've got the Wessex culture in Wiltshire, and you know it's relatively rich. I mean, they talk about it being this wonderfully rich, all these great Wessex graves and things, you know. But you compare them to Mediterranean graves of the same period, and it really is very very poor quality, very second rate. But it's still the best we've got.
Right.
It's a very thriving society, and yeah, and at that stage they were definitely exploiting the southwestern tin resources. Sure, we're going over a wide area.
Right.
There are also references now. I was hearing something earlier on in the year. There's some tantalizing stuff about references to Cornish tin during Roman period, the Roman period, and it's all to do with Carthage and the Carthaginians controlling southern Spain. And so the Romans wouldn't have had, the early Republican Romans wouldn't have had access to Spanish tin for their bronze. This is right at the end of the Bronze Age, beginning of the Iron Age. And so it's just possible that for a couple of hundred years, they were actually, along with possibly the Greek colonies around the central Mediterranean and in the south of France, they were going up through the French rivers and across the Channel to Britain. It's a bit of a schlep to go when you've got tin much closer. And so after the Punic Wars, when Carthage is no more,
Right.
the Romans then move into Spain, take over Spain. They don't need to go to Cornwall anymore.
Right. They've got it right there.
Yeah, and we don't hear much about Britain until Claudius. Well, until first of all Julius Caesar, and then Claudius, who feels he needs a conquest, he needs a successful campaign and something to make himself out as a better general and a better I nearly said president then, a better emperor. And so he invades Britain.
Street cred.
But he's probably, I mean, all the archaeology suggests what he's going for is the wheat. Britain was a veritable wheat basket, grain basket, as to feed the northern part of the empire, and also silver. High quality silver was coming from Britain all through that period, and it's likely that was one of the things they went for. Of course, they found the gold in Wales, and they probably started using the tin, but I don't know how much of that tin was going back to Rome. And the chap who I heard talking about it didn't seem to think there was any historical references in the imperial period to imports of tin from Cornwall. And that was probably because they get it much cheaper and much more handily in Spain.
Yes,
it's quite complicated. It doesn't show, it doesn't show up in the archaeology all that often. And you've got to get down and analyze hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pieces of bronze in order to find out where the tin's coming from.
Exactly.
And then you can start playing games with making up trade routes and that sort of thing. It's hugely expensive.
Go ahead.
No, I say it's hugely expensive stuff doing that kind of research, and there are relatively few people who can command those sorts of grants to actually get it done.
Right. And
Fairly,
you're not going to get money in this country anymore from the government.
don't even get much in this country either at the moment. But,
Well,
still better than you are. Still
yeah.
better off than you are. Yeah.
Well, I understand the University of Sheffield closed their archaeology department.
I believe so. Yeah, that was. Don't know what was going on there. I don't know. There's there's something very strange going on with that. But I didn't. It was just after we came down here, and I haven't really heard any sort of follow up on that.
Mm-hmm.
As to any fallout about it. I tend to sort of be a little bit distanced from any sort of academic stuff here. I'm having to make a special effort to even try and keep up with anything. half of me is saying, I ought to be doing it because I'm writing these books and things, and half of me is saying, what the hell? I'm retired now. I can
Right.
play in my garden, mate.
Exactly. Well, and there's so much to explore where you are. I mean, Dartmoor is a treasure trove of Bronze Age, Neolithic, iron. I haven't been to your part of it, but I've been to the area around Bovey Tracy a few times.
Yeah. You'd be right at home here. It rains a lot.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Oregon is famous for its high rainfall, but around
Where I
here,
live, it is. Yep. And the coast is even more.
Tavistock and the western edge of Dartmoor is just. I reckon we get about 60% more rain here than we did over the other side in Wiltshire. Only 150 miles away, 130 miles away.
Okay.
Just the fact that the rain comes in off the Atlantic and hits that high ridge going up onto the high escarpment going up onto Dartmoor, and it empties itself all over us. And if it goes up the Tamar Valley, goes north, it somehow, I don't know why it does it, but it seems to sort of turn around halfway up the Tamar. And we get a number of times when you can actually see the rain coming up the far side over by the Tamar, which is about 5 miles from us, something like that, the border with Cornwall. And it comes up that valley, and then it curves round 2 or 3 miles north of here. And the bloody rain comes at us from the north. Just open, you're sort of watching this rain go past over in the west there, and you're expecting it to be nice relief rain. It's we're not going to get that. It should be coming from Plymouth and up against the hills, and that's when we're going to get it. And it comes in from the north and just chucks it down on us. And I haven't figured out why that works yet, but I'm sure someone will enlighten me sometime soon.
Yes, I'm sure the meteorologists have it all figured out.
I'm sure, it's complicated, but I don't know why it seems to curve around at that point. Why it doesn't just go straight across the peninsula into the Bristol Channel? Maybe some of it does, because there's no real high ground. You've got Bodmin Moor on the one side, and you've got Dartmoor on the other, and the Tamar Valley runs straight through the middle. And by the time you get to the headwaters of the Tamar, you're already dropping down towards Tintagel and Bude and the Bristol Channel coast. And I'm surprised that the weather just doesn't carry on. I'd be very happy if some of it did, quite honestly, although we haven't had that much rain this year. Sorry, digressing a bit. It is lovely here, and there's just so much archaeology, and you know, I go out and I wish I was 20 years younger and could actually stay out all day and actually really go off the beaten track and look for some of these places. But we're trying to, in our limited way, we're trying to get to see some of the archaeology and trying to both be well enough at the same time, enough for us to go out and actually go to some of these more exciting places. But yeah, I think a lot of it's on the other side of Dartmoor. It's more accessible from the east than it is from here. But there is some good stuff down between here and the coast, just east of Plymouth. That sort of southwest corner of Dartmoor. There's some very nice archaeology from the Bronze Age visible. We haven't got to see it yet, though. Hopefully this year or more likely next year now, we'll get down and really explore some of those places. But they are a bit off the beaten track. You do have to walk quite a few miles before you get there, you know.
Okay.
And that's getting increasingly difficult as we get older.
Yes, I understand that.
One of the things about archaeology is it's very cruel to your body. It does tend to knock your body about a bit. You don't realize it until you're much older, and you think, "Why am I such a wreck?"
That makes sense. Yes, because I think you're younger than I am. We're close,
Possibly,
but I think you're younger than I am.
yeah.
But, it's hard to believe, actually. I think about it. I'll be 69 in December, and I haven't really quite understood middle age yet.
I'm older than you then.
Oh, okay.
only just.
Yeah, I'm
I'm
surprised.
halfway through 70 this year. So.
Okay.
But
So
yeah,
not much.
we're about of an age, I think.
Yes. Yeah, we
Yeah.
are.
But
And
yeah, I've found in the last 2 years it's really hit me. I used to consider myself to be sort of, you know, in up here. I was still sort of 35, maybe 40 at a push. Now I realise that, you know, I never think of myself as much younger than 60. You just suddenly realise your body just turns around and says, "No, that's enough."
Yep.
You're not going on 20-mile hikes anymore. That just isn't going to happen.
No.
So anyway, we have plenty to do, and there's a lot to see, and hopefully we've got a decade or so more to see it in. So I'm very hopeful to get to see some more of it until we're so blooming bored with Bronze Age circular huts and enclosures that we're quite happy to stay.
Yes.
Yeah, but there's stone circles and there's settlements and these wonderful linear stone lines, and nobody knows how old they are. A lot of them, you know, are they? They always used to be thought of as Bronze Age, but that was back in the day when we thought Stonehenge and Avebury and the other sites were all Bronze Age as well.
Mm-hmm.
And now we know that they're, you know, 400 or 500 years earlier than we thought they were.
Right.
But a lot of these tiny little sites have never been dated. And so some people refer to them as Neolithic and some people refer to them as Bronze Age. And I've been trying to get my head around it at the moment. And it's really difficult to come up with anything that definitive. The undated ones still tend to be called Bronze Age. And I'm trying to to find signs that people have dated some of these little sites. You know, all
Mm-hmm.
these things that are called Nine Maidens and the Merry Maidens and things like that. Um, they're very local little henges and stone circles, and it's quite important because if they are Bronze Age, if they are contemporary with the houses um, that scattered all over the countryside, very close to these stone alignments and stone circles. Um, if they belong in all in one period, then they're quite late um, remnants of the stone circle sort of culture, if you want to call it that. You know,
Okay.
all the big ones are all um, done by about 2200 BC. By the time the Bronze Age really kicks off,
Right.
Stonehenge is going up. Nothing's been changed at Avebury or Rollright Stones or any of the others for decades, for hundreds of years. Basically, those stones have become fossilized. Those circles have become fossilized, um, and they're not you. They fall out of use by about 1600, 1500 BC. By the Middle Bronze Age, halfway through the Middle Bronze Age, those sites have lost their power, have lost their religion, or whatever it is that drives the creation of the stone circles. I think it's religion, but
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is that drives them has gone by the way. They're doing different things by that stage,
Right.
um, and yet down in the southwest and in these little corners and out of way places, you're still getting little stone circles being built, or are you? But if they are late, you're still getting these little stone circles being built.
Mm-hmm.
And that suggests that these people are still hanging on to what by then is a very old fashioned and out of date religion, or an out of date way of doing religion, not necessarily a change in the religion itself, a
Right.
way of doing it, way of dealing with it. Um, and that's quite an important cultural thing, but I'm finding it very difficult to actually um, get a handle on that. It seems like the more these things get excavated, the more they turn out to be Neolithic.
Right.
Um, and they are survivals. People, the Bronze Age houses are actually starting to um, yeah, seeing that thing from Kelly Druce, I'm not absolutely sure what we're looking at there. There are a couple of places where there are stone circles in woodland, um,
Right.
but I don't know anything about dead in a circle and being green around it. Um, we need some more of that, I'm afraid.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah, I'm not sure either. Well, and especially anything with archaeology or archaeology, I'm not aware of. There's supposed to be I think it's in part of Transylvania. I think so, or Romania, that is supposed to have. Oh, no, that's different because I don't think that was dead in a circle and green around it. I think that's even different. So I'm not sure. Yeah.
hmm. I mean, it depends. I don't know whether we're talking about a dead ring or a an actual area. No stone around it. Trees are alive outside of the circle. Yeah. Sorry,
Yeah.
Kelly. I've never heard that one. I don't know that at all.
No,
Um,
I'm afraid I don't either.
sorry about that. But
Yeah. Check
beyond our
back,
ken.
check back, Kelly. Because mo this show could get hundreds or 1,000 views on Facebook over time, and somebody may see your question and or hear this and have an answer they post. So check back on the website periodically and for this video and see if anything comes up. Because yeah, I'm stumped too.
Yeah,
So
it is difficult. I mean, there is such a wealth of information out there on the internet, and increasingly there is such a wealth of um, wild theories that often are based on nothing except someone who with a little bit of uh, not maliciousness, but just a little bit witty, trying to say something, and people take it seriously, um, and you
yeah,
end up with this whole line of thinking that there are lots of people saying, "What about these sites where we know that it was 20,000 years old and there's evidence of it?" And you think, I actually know that place, and there's nothing to say that it's older than 3,000 years or whatever.
right.
Um, and there's an awful lot of that coming around and on the
Hmm.
internet, because it's anybody can put stuff up, and
Exactly.
you don't have to be qualified, and you don't have to be talking the truth, and it's only if people turn around and say, no, actually that's rubbish,
Hmm.
and enough people say it, that you get the chance to actually see that it is, to fact check it.
Right.
um,
And
so much of the
it's so
stuff isn't
easy to
checked.
create with AI and such nowadays,
Oh,
as well as just video tools and such. It's so easy to create any kind of a
yeah.
fake to say anything you want.
Well, there was just one in case point in case. About 2 days ago, there was something came up on Facebook with a beautiful picture. I must say, beautiful picture of what was looked like Stonehenge at the bottom,
Hmm.
with the Milky Way coming out of it. And there's a couple of good photographers who've taken pictures of the Milky Way standing vertically in over Stonehenge, and yes, they're manipulated, but they both things are actually there. They're just not
Hmm.
necessarily seen at exactly the same moment. Um, and they've got one of the shots, a supposed shooting star from the Perseids going across this lot,
Hmm.
and saying what a wonderful picture it is and everything. And the thing that got me was it was a bright blue meteor, and it looked a bit like old Christmas cards of the star in the sky that was supposed to show everybody where Bethlehem was.
Uh-huh.
Um, it was that kind of almost a cross with a long tail on it. Um, and I thought there was something funny about that. And so I had a look at the actual picture of Stonehenge, started taking a second look at that, and I thought, yeah, half the stones are missing. What's going on? And I started looking, and I looked a bit closer, and the whole thing was AI.
Yeah.
There was something that was supposed to be a trilithon, which is one of the big sets of stones on the inner circle or inner
Hmm.
part of the circle, horseshoe. Um, and they have two very broad stones going up with a very narrow gap, and then a lintel that goes right the way across both of them, right? And the lintels are held on, as we all know, by little studs in the tops of the stones and hollows in the
Right.
lintel. And this had this picture of one very broad stone that looked like one of these trilithon stones, and then there was a lintel sitting square on top of it, like the top notch on an Easter Island statue. It was just, it fitted the stone perfectly, but it wasn't bridging any gap at all. And then there was a stud sticking out the top of the lintel. So the AI had read the description, but being a robot, hadn't made sense out of it.
Yes.
And had come up with this you know layered cake with a candle on the top. instead of a triathlon. And the others are just, the stones were in the wrong order, and they were in the
Right,
wrong places. And some of them were obviously taken from pictures and just rearranged slightly. And of course, the Perseid meteor was a complete fake.
right.
And then it turns out that I didn't know the photographer that claimed that it was supposed to be John somebody or other. He was an astronomer. Sorry, an archaeoastronomer, and I hadn't come across this guy before. But someone else turned around and said, this is not one of his photographs anyway. I know his work. It's a completely different style. And so they're just completely faked the whole thing. They've got an
Yeah.
AI picture. They'd put together an AI picture. They'd obviously seen some of these other photographs of the Milky Way and decided they'd make it out of AI, and then attributed it to a genuine photographer.
Mhm.
And it was complete drivel. And everybody was going, "Oh, it's amazing! Oh, it's wonderful! What a lovely photograph you've taken there!" And presumably, this person was basking in all the praise. And it wasn't his photograph at all. It was just AI. And there's just so much of that about now. You've got to look at everything and spend 10 minutes looking at it to see if it's real or not.
Yeah,
Which is a great shame. Great shame indeed.
and it's getting harder and harder to be able to figure out a lot of those.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes you can, oh, this color is a little wrong, or the mouth or the eyes just don't look quite right, or
Mm.
there'll be a little something, but it's so hard.
Well, you've got telescopic depth of field in a photograph. You think, hang on,
Mhm.
something ought to be out of focus in that photograph, and it's all perfectly in focus.
Exactly. Well, Tim, we've been going for quite a while, which is great. I love it. But do you want to hold up the new book for people?
All right, yeah, but it's not a very good copy of it because it's my proof copy. I haven't actually got around to buying any new ones yet.
Okay.
Buying any copies for myself. So it's got
The
this grey
body and the
band
bag?
across it. It's called, oh, sorry, The
Yeah,
Body in
the
the Bag,
body and the bag.
and
Okay.
it's a complete change from the archaeological stuff. Well, there is an archaeologist in there, and the body in the bag is discovered. I'm not giving away anything by saying it's discovered on an archaeological excavation,
Okay.
um, but it's not archaeological. It's obviously a modern thing, and so there is an archaeologist involved in it. He's not the hero, but he's one of the main characters. Um, but it's not about an archaeological period. It's just a straightforward modern detective story,
Well, I'm
and
looking forward to that one
with
too.
various twists. Sorry,
I said I'm looking forward to reading that one as well.
it's very tongue in cheek, and it's quite light-hearted,
Uh-huh.
um, despite the fact that it's about a murder victim and finding out who the victim is and who the murderer was. It's very light-hearted,
Thank you,
um,
Kelly.
and a
You
complete
as well.
change. Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Uh, and yeah, I'm hoping to knock out about 3 of these, get that out of my system, and
Okay.
then I shall go back to doing the third one of the much vaunted and so far uncompleted trilogy about Stonehenge.
Yeah.
Uh,
Uh, well, I'm going to order the detective story this weekend, and they need to get into Barnes and Noble. Um,
yeah,
yeah.
I haven't tried them. So far I've just stuck with Amazon.
Hmm.
Not terribly impressed with Amazon politically,
Right.
but it's certainly a way to get a distribution. Um, yeah, I need to pay more attention to what I'm doing with the books and actually think about uh, possibly looking for an alternative way of putting them out. And I also need to do some basic advertising. I confess completely that I'm useless at advertising my books. Um, but
Self-marketing is my biggest problem.
you're a lot better at it than I am. Really, a lot better.
I'm,
You put more effort into it for starters.
well,
Kelly, we saw that message, and we'll try and look up the link a bit later,
you're
and
right.
maybe get back to you.
And the book, I was also asking if your book is available in Australia.
As far as I know, it's on Amazon.co.uk,
Hmm.
but it's available on all the other Amazon sites as well. Uh, you just get redirected to Amazon.co.uk. Um,
Right.
and yes, it is available in Australia. I know that at least one person so far has from Australia has been able to buy it, so it is available there. And my other books have been sold in Australia
Yeah.
and the States and Canada and one in um, Hungary. I know
Excellent.
who that is. I know who that is. That's an aunt. Um, and yeah, a few in Europe as well. So most places seem you can get it. Just have to look for it. And I
You,
hope that people enjoy the detective stories as much as they enjoy the historical ones.
yeah. Well, your writing
I enjoy
is
writing them.
your writing is so good, and your ability to tell a story. I'm sure the detective one is wonderful.
Well, I hope so. You can let me know. Um, you can let me know officially with a what you call it a rating.
Oh,
But
right.
you can also you can also let me know exactly what you feel about it and be honest. I don't mind. I can
Uh,
cope nowadays.
excellent. Excellent. Well, Tim,
Yeah,
I can't thank you enough for this. This has been great. We've gone an hour and 42 minutes. Um, so people are going to get their viewing pleasures worth. And
I hope so.
I look forward to the next one. And you two need to get over here. I've got a haunted guest room waiting.
Yeah, sort a few things out first, then.
Yeah,
Um, I don't think it's people are being warned about sort of traveling over there and not getting visas and
yeah.
getting
Actually, I
getting locked up for short periods and things like that. It just doesn't seem worth the effort at this stage at the moment. But thank you. I would love to come over. There's a lot of America I'm not worried about seeing. I must admit, but
Mhm.
the West Coast definitely and up your way, and it's a short hop from where you are to where one of my old school friends lives in Vancouver. So, um,
Vancouver, BC,
sorry.
Vancouver, British Columbia.
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
indeed.
we
Yeah.
have a. There's a Vancouver, Washington that's just across the state line from me.
Okay,
So
okay. I see.
that's um,
No, no. This is in BC. Yeah.
yeah, a much
Um,
nicer place than the Vancouver, in my
I
opinion.
wouldn't know. I didn't realize there were two actually.
Yeah,
Yeah, but I would like to do that, and
yeah.
quite like to see the Great Lakes too. But whether that will actually happen, don't know. At
Well, and
the moment,
actually, the
we're
Great
worried
Lakes
that we
you
can't
can
afford
see
a
from
kitchen.
you can see a lot of the Great Lakes from Canada,
Yeah,
and because I agree, I've actually been telling people don't come to the States. You don't know what you're going to get,
but
you know.
who knows? I mean,
Yeah,
you never know.
I
We might see. We might come into some money and get over there, or you might come into some money and get over here, and you're always welcome.
Thank you. I
And
appreciate that.
we'll take you up onto the moors and show you a couple of the little sites anyway.
Yeah,
Ones we
I'd
can
love
get
it.
to easily.
I'd love it. So,
All right then.
well, thank you all for watching, and
Thank you,
I'll see
everyone.
you
Yeah.
on soon.
Thanks, everyone.